This video is about briefly giving you an overview of which examples are provided with the platform that you can use for further experiments. So the basic question is, are there further examples? And the simple answer is yes, and you can find them in our code repository on GitHub. Roughly, you can find one example in the platform install package along the installation that was explained by Ahmad. You can find the example from this video series, which is also online. Then we have certain artificial examples because we wanted to try out whether certain capabilities of the platform are working as we want to have them. And finally, there is the demonstrator that we had on the Hannover Fair 22, Hannover Messe 22, and on the Tage der digitalen Technologien 2022 as a demonstrator. And this involves AI model, and a rather complex data flow. All these examples are in GitHub to ease your work with the platform, but also help us to do automated regression testing because they are executed and tested on each change that we do with the bigger parts of the platform. In the platform install package, you find a pretty simple example. It consists of two services, a simple source and a simple receiver. The source is providing rather simple data just created out of the blue and sent to the receiver. The receiver displays that information on the console, and that's it. Here I must give you a hint because you will not find the service implementation of these services directly in the install packages rather than a platform test component which contains more services. It's easing our work and reducing the numbers of packages and modules that we have in the platform. The other examples all contain their service implementation as you have seen it in the series of videos by Alexander. And here you have, of course, the example that you had in this video series. It is a source service, it is a transformer, basically with Java, but there's also a Python variant, and there is a sync service, and you already have a chain of 3 services that are working together and that you in principle can distribute over devices. Regarding the, I call them artificial examples, we have 4 for you that you can look into. And at a glance, they might look a bit like the example that you had in this series of videos. They all have 3 services. They all have a kind of artificial sender that creates data. They all have a kind of transformer which is doing something with the data and a receiver. But when you look more into the details, you might see that they differ. So the first thing, of course, is a Python service. So it doesn't do much intelligence in that, but it integrates Python here, and its variant called Python Sync does the whole thing in a synchronous fashion. So the Python example all has asynchronous services, the Python Sync example has synchronous services. Also, the synchronous Python example employs MQTT for the data transport. The others, for easing the testing on our side, employ AMQP as transport protocol. Then there is the examples RTSA. RTSA is the real-time scoring agent of RapidMiner, an AI platform in itself. This requires at the moment that you have Java 8 to execute RTSA. And so this is a very specific example that shows you that you can mix, for example, Java 11 for the execution of all the other services and a particular Java version for a single service that must be there for the execution. It also employs the RapidMiner RTSA. However, this is a commercial product and we cannot just ship it to you. So from our perspective, it contains a mock service that emulates RapidMiner RTSA, but if you have a real license of that, you can just simply exchange that by swapping some files. And that shows how we try to operate with IPR protected software and that we try to keep this software within your realms without distributing it to the internet for licenses and legal purposes. And the last example is Codex. Codex is an open source anonymizer for arbitrary data. And that shows how to use that anonymizer, which, like RTSA, is a platform supplied service. And it also outlines how to integrate an external program that here in this case has been written with Go. It also has a further difference. You see it on the right side. This example is writing the data into a custom database. And finally, as announced before, we have the code for the demonstrator of the Hannover Fair 22. It's just called Examples HM22. And you see, it's a little bit more complex. So it has actually 3 sources, 2 machine connectors, one OPC UA on the top, one AES connector on the bottom, which goes against an asset administration shell. It involves a camera. It involves 2 alternative AIs that can be switched at runtime, one in Python, one with RapidMiner RTSA. It involves a central control of data flows, taking camera pictures, pushing them through the AI, making a decision whether multiple camera pictures of the same element that you look at, it was just a small aluminium car model for quality inspection, whether they can be considered as a good car or whether it must go back to correction in production. It involves a robot that is being controlled here, and finally turned on the data to also a platform supplied service, which turns data which comes from such a process into an asset administration shell, which here was finally presented on a tablet. This is a little bit more complex process because it also involves capabilities of the platform like data tracing and backward data flows. But there is in the meantime material that you can read up in the platform handbook and also in the first papers on the platform. If you need more details, if you need more explanations, for example, on the examples HM22, don't hesitate, call us up, write us an email, let us know.